Today, we're taking a look at Vectorman for the Sega Genesis. Released in 1995, this game was considered a late entry to the console's lifespan, despite there being 2 more years of releases. Those 2 years, though, were very lean in new Genesis games, as the gaming world was already looking ahead to the likes of the Sony PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and even Sega's own Sega Saturn. Not only was Vectorman developed as a means to keep some interest in the aging Genesis, but it was also to be an answer to Nintendo's ultra-popular Donkey Kong Country, which released a year prior. Sega leaned hard on developer Blue Sky to come up with a game that would draw attention back to the console. So how did that turn out? After the quirky Sega and Blue Sky title cards go by, we're hit with Vectorman's title screen, already showcasing the emphasis on 3D space and visuals. I let it fully play through the first time, and then after the prologue section, we looped back to the title screen. It was at this moment that I realized that your inputs don't register until the title screen presentation plays out. You can't even press start to skip ahead. Later on, this actually becomes really annoying, but we'll get to that. The story is a simple one. In the year 2049, Earth has become uninhabitable due to mass pollution. Humans crafted a means to take an extended vacation into space, while specialized robots cleaned up the environment to make it livable again. However, tragedy strikes, as the main overseer computer, known as Raster, had a salvaged nuclear bomb connected to its master control circuits in error. This caused a reprogramming in Raster, as it became known as Warhead. It mandated that all robots stop cleaning up the Earth, and instead start producing weapons to destroy the humans once they return. Meanwhile, our hero, Vectorman, was away on a garbage run while all this went down, so he was unaffected by the reprogramming. Seeing what had occurred, he vowed to stop Warhead to save the humans. The base controls are pretty simple, with the A and B buttons set to shoot energy balls out of Vectorman's hands, and the C button to jump. You could also fire in 8 directions, which would become very useful with all the chaos that's going to be going on. Also, shooting downwards would allow for a slight reduced descent, which could help in some platforming. The A, B, and C controls could be changed in the options too if you wanted. Speaking of the options, you had the ability to turn off sound effects and music if you so wished. Game difficulty could be adjusted as well, and a sound test was available too. It even had a section to read up on info about the game's collectibles and general interactables. Even though the instruction manual held all this information, it's always nice to see a compendium in the game itself too. So as simple as the initial game mechanics start out, the game actually gets a bit more in-depth with a plethora of collectibles available. Vectorman could make use of 7 additional forms to help get around levels better. He just needs to collect the associated power-up. There were also 3 additional forms that were boss level specific. Some standard power-ups included health replenishment and sometimes life extension too, and of course 1-ups as well. There were 3 weapon upgrades, as well as a shield and a screen-clearing attack. The weapons had only a limited amount of shots, but they seemed like a decent amount to make pickups worth it. It's just a shame that you couldn't swap weapons to save on the new stuff, and also, the display never showed how much ammo the weapon had remaining. Another fun concept of power-ups was the multipliers. You can get a ×2, ×3, ×5, and a whopping ×10 multiplier for a short period of time. These would affect your damage output, as well as health recovery, and even 1-ups. The way you moved was consistent with a run-and-gun style of gameplay, and controls felt responsive. With all the details I mentioned before, the game was fun to play, for about 10 seconds. Vectorman really looked like it could have been a proper fun game to play, but I very quickly experienced the reality under the hood. Let's start with this. I did not make it past the first level. Keep that in mind as I tell you why. Enemies would always fire at you from off-screen before you could even see them, and if you think memorizing their locations would help, that's a big nope. Sometimes they're where they were before, and other times they're further back or forward. But that's fine, I guess. They're gonna fire at you from off-screen regardless. There was this one bug-styled enemy that moved in swarms of about 2 to 4. Once you destroy all of them, the path should be safe, right? Wrong. More will just zoom in from the screen edge or from behind the platforms. This is something I hate in video games unless it's puzzle related. Something a little less important is the collectibles for points that are littered around the stage. Many are just floating there waiting to be picked up, but if you happen to spawn some from defeating enemies, you better not blink, because they float down away from you nearly instantly. They don't stop on the ground either, they'll just clip on through. When they drop, they do so completely horizontally. So if you manage to beat an enemy on a diagonal slope, basically half of the spoils are forfeit to the ground instantly. And that first level boss, oh my god, it's so many bad design choices wrapped into one. Okay, yes, the way the fight is presented looks fun, but the way it moves is painfully like stupid ass Dark Souls. Yeah, I said it. The hitboxes on its attacking wings are wider than the graphic itself, yet the hitbox on its body for me to hit is squeezed inside of the artwork, and the way it moves and attacks leaves almost no time to recover from jumping to avoid getting damaged. Plus, you're afforded maybe 1 second, if that, to fire at the weak point. And for real, how many times do I have to hit this guy before he goes down? Yeah, it has an attack pattern to learn, but I think I'll leave the old dodge, 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 one attack, dodge, dodge gameplay to stupid ass Dark Souls. The core gameplay of Vectorman is not bad, actually. It's the surrounding poor choices that drag it down faster than a cement block drowning a guy who owes the mob money. If you manage to beat this game, or heck, even the first boss, kudos. You have far more patience for poor game design than I do. The gameplay gets a 3 out of 10. Since Vectorman was made to compete with the likes of Donkey Kong Country and the future evolution of games into 3D, the developers decided to use pre-rendered graphics to get that 3D feel into the 2D game engine. They used a very interesting method to animate Vectorman and some enemies and bosses. Rather than them being just whole characters that swap drawings, they were segmented into movable parts. This has been done before, but with pixel graphics. Here, using the pre-rendered graphics allowed there to be more feeling of 3D along with the flexibility of movement without having to redraw every time. This worked especially well for Vectorman himself, as he was composed entirely of orbs, and said orbs could be rearranged to make his multiple forms and animations work smoothly. Impressive as that was, the Sega Genesis was not the console to try to pull that off. With its low color display limit, and even with advanced tricks and techniques, there could only be 88 different colors on screen at any time. This made for some very washed out visuals. I get that it does in fact match the aesthetic of the game's setting, but I just find it ugly while it's in motion. While they did put some colors that did pop out nicely, they didn't put them anywhere that was actually important. Remember my earlier complaints about the stage enemies? Add on the fact that they and their projectiles would sometimes be hidden in the muddy colors, not really showing up well until it's too late. It seems like there was an unfortunate experimentation phase with these pre-rendered graphics in the first few years. Because a complaint I had about Donkey Kong Country, and is made even worse here, is the screen flashing being way over the top and actually really dangerous for people with visual sensitivities. In Donkey Kong Country, at least it was limited to a few levels, but here, it's a game mechanic that shows up likely throughout the entire game. When you bust open a TV screen to get items, the screen flashes multiple times for about 3 seconds. It's jarring and makes the brain tingle in a not good way. I don't have to go on too long about the backgrounds. They're just as bland visually as the characters and are part of the whole muddy blending issue mentioned before. But boy, don't those flags animate so nicely? Great effort allocation, guys. The graphics of Vectorman get a 5 out of 10. When I heard that the soundtrack of this game was techno-inspired, I was looking forward to it, as that's adjacent to my genre of choice. And for the most part, it was an enjoyable soundtrack, of what I actually got to listen to. But in all honesty, the Genesis sound chip didn't seem up to the task of making the track sound appealing. Maybe it was poor instrument choice? I'm not too sure. Meanwhile, the sound effects are quite sharp to the ear for the most part. Considering a lot of it is electricity-based, it seems fitting, and that didn't really bother me. What did bother me though, was the poor attempt at adding some dialogue to the game, even in short bursts. Anytime Vectorman would make any quips, I would just go, huh? Barely being able to understand him alone, the sound effects would also drown out anything he said. Also, he would make occasional grunts and groans that weren't consistent, so it made me confused thinking I took damage somehow. Once again, jarring. The music and sound get a 6 out of 10. I never actually owned or even played Vectorman when it came out, but I would see a lot of advertisements for it in magazines and on TV. It was especially showcased on video game TV shows, and the way it looked and moved at the time felt really cool. Definitely made me want to try it, but not enough to activate Pester the Parents mode. Come the early 2000s, I got the ability to try a lot of games that I hadn't tried before, and this game was one of them. I recall that even then, despite the hype, I played it for maybe no more than 10 minutes, then moved on. I think that since I didn't have a reason to keep playing, I didn't pick up on all the problems that the game has. Either that or I just erased it from my brain. The nostalgia hit gets a 3 out of 10. Vectorman is a case study that proves a game needs to be more than a pretty package. Just looking at the surface of the game, you would have seen advanced graphics, great animation, fun game mechanics, and a trendy soundtrack. Mere minutes into actually playing the game, though, would show its true muddy colors. Hitboxes, screen exposure, flashing lights, weird sound effect timing, gameplay loops, and so much more. It was a lot of little things that added up and overtook anything good about this game. In trying to outdo the competition, Vectorman focused too much on presentation and not enough on substance. Why it was the second best-selling holiday season video game of 1995 can be attributed solely to timing and the fact that it looked pretty on the surface. But don't take my word for it, I'm confident enough to say you should give it a try and experience the jank and busted balls for yourself.